Hi, everyone, and welcome to 647. The truth starts now, and it's the tale of two cities. You cannot make this stuff up. Last night in New York City was the MET Gala. Okay, so if you are a white, leftist, elite, rich person, and you need to go and rub elbows with celebrities, then the Met Gala is your opportunity. It only costs $75,000 per plate to go have dinner with these folks. And the theme, you all would have loved it. It was Black dandyism, right? With women wearing outfits that allowed their vaginas to show, and only white wealthy leftists, right, are there celebrating Black folks and virtue signaling. And of course, there's a parade of leftist Black celebrities, and it's just the silliest thing you ever saw in your life. That's the tale of one city last night. 75 grand a pop for that? Ridiculous. Then the other city is Pittsburgh, right? A Pirates game. And when you get to work, you got to watch this video. There were three doofus guys, white guys, who were messing with a stadium worker, a Black guy. And one of them spit on this guy, and he went off. He actually spit on him twice. And this guy punched out one of the guys. He hit him, it must have been 4 or 5 times. Then the guy who spit on him the first and second time, he took his belt off and beat that guy with his belt. So, I don't know. Maybe we should all chip in our money and send all those men to the Met Gala next year and see if they can straighten themselves out. But what a way to start. So now let's get to the DC talk, because, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on there yesterday. I don't know if you saw the interview with the Canadian Prime Minister. He's an ex-Goldman Sachs guy, and he's a leftist, and he hates Trump. And Trump basically pulled down his pants, put him over his lap, and gave him a spanking on TV, and basically said, we'd be very friendly and cordial about all this, but we don't need your cars. We don't need your lumber. We don't need your steel. We're going to do all that in our country. So we're just going to have tariffs on you guys. We've been paying you $200 billion, and you mouth off constantly. And we provide all of your military security. And so what are you guys thinking? I don't know what they're thinking, but Trump sure knows what they're thinking. And he knows that if he closes that border by putting big tariffs on their stuff, they're not going to make it financially. And this Goldman guy, Carney's already getting them in bed with China. And China's a bad bet now because they are sweating things financially. So let's go to DC talk, because there was good DC talk yesterday, starting with the Supreme Court voting whether or not Trump can ban transgender people from the military. And the court has not been voting very well recently, but they voted to pass this and say that Trump can ban transgender people from the military. I can't even believe we have to have discussions about this kind of thing. But of course, Kagan and Sotomayor voted no, right? They'd love to have an all transgender army where everyone's on the battlefield bitch slapping and swinging their purses at one another. What else went on in DC yesterday? Well, Trump signed an executive order saying no more gain of function research in the United States. We're not paying one dime for that. And that was how this whole thing kicked off with the pandemic, okay? The All of this nonsense we were told, and Fauci lying before Congress. No, there was no gain of function. It all started in North Carolina, right? It all started with research at a university in the United States, paid for by our tax dollars. Then that went over to the Wuhan lab, and then the Wuhan lab let it out when U.S. soldiers were over there doing an exercise. So all those soldiers would bring it back to the United States. And all of these genocidal billionaires were in on this thing, and it's all going to come out. But right now, there's no money for them. They got to go offshore to come up with their next genocidal plan. Stephen Miller is suing John Roberts of the Supreme Court because he's been lying about the fact that he was a member of the Federalist Society. In fact, he's listed on their leadership directory in 1997 and 98, but he's been telling the Washington Post, the LA Times, everyone, no, I have no memory of any of that. I may have gone to one of their functions once, but I was not a member. What's the problem with that? There's lots of leftist judges in that organization, and Roberts votes like a leftist. There's something wrong with Amy Coney Barrett, too. She is voting pure lefty. Maybe it's because she was an academic. I don't know, but we're supposed to have a conservative stacked court, and we're not getting conservative results from this court. The only consistent voters are Alito and Thomas. So Stephen Miller is suing John Roberts. You can't make it up. All right, what else? We had a bill that was being voted on yesterday that was supposed to cap how much Big Pharma can charge Americans for medicines. Why is this an issue? Because they send all of their medicine to Europe at one price, and the price that we pay in our country where they're operating is 400% higher than what the Europeans are charged. And so the bill said we're going to cap the cost of medicine in the U.S. to whatever the rate is that Europeans and other countries are paying for the same medicine, kind of the tariff idea, right? And rhinos voted it down, right? Supposed to represent us. That's a big concern. The cost of medicine is a big concern for easily 60% of Americans. And they voted it down. Why would they do that? They do it because they're paid off by the pharmaceutical industry, Big Pharma. They're paid off with Big Pharma dark money. Okay, so don't accept these smiley faces when they come around during voting time. Find out if they voted this down. This is not making America first. And the rhinos are the big problem in D.C. right now, especially the Rhino Senate. So they are trying to stop everything that Trump is doing. What else do we have in D.C. talk? We got Hunter Biden got disbarred yesterday. Not a big story. He's not really a practicing attorney. But any way that the truth gets to this guy and justice gets to this guy, I think is important for Americans to see. And this whole Biden clown act, that, we're still cleaning up all these messes from these people. And it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. All right. Coca-Cola, pretty successful company, right? Well, you'll be happy to know that it's been found out that U.S. taxpayers have been subsidizing Coca-Cola to the tune of $10 billion a year, buried in the Farm Bill. Buried in the Farm Bill, right? So that Coca-Cola can sell $10 billion worth of sugar water to the poorest Americans. Actually, they're getting it for free. kids who are on SNAP, people who are on food stamps, they can use that money, taxpayer money, to go buy sugar water, right? Can of Coke's got like 20 of those little white bags of sugar in it. And what's the problem down at the lower end of the food chain and up? Obesity and diabetes in our country. And how do we want to go after that? We want to subsidize Coke $10 billion of tax money every year. Okay? Coke, that's up to 20% of their annual revenue from taxpayer paying for the poorest people who get the worst nutrition. Now they get to wash all that junk food down with sugar water, with caffeine in it. It's just disgusting. Anyway, all these things are being found out. We call this next 2 years the big reveal. The big reveal. The globalists wanted the big reset. Well, we're getting the big reveal, and that's going to stop the big reset. So let's see what happens. That's story 3. Let's go to number 4. Guess what's happening in Rome today? We're picking a pope. Actually, we don't have anything to say about it. I don't. I'm not even Catholic. But there are 1.4 billion Catholics, and most of them did not like the last pope because he was a globalist and he got in bed with the Chinese and he took Chinese money because the church is hurting for money. And so now 133 cardinals are going to pick the next pope. And here's the problem. Francis, the globalist pope, promoted 80% of those cardinals. So this conclave, what do you think you're going to get from it? Smart money's on a globalist pope. And that's a bad thing for Catholics. And you know what? There's going to be a split in this church because there's 2 groups in the Catholic Church. There's the groups that like the traditional Latin Mass, and there's the new contemporary Mass. And young people around the world can't explain it, but in huge numbers, they're going to the Catholic Church for the traditional Latin Mass. And that's the future of that church. And these clowns voting for globalism and trans everything and whatever silly thing comes down the pike, that's what these globalists want. They want the things that upset societies so that there's chaos and so that they can take advantage financially. So this vote, it does not portend well for the church. They can do all the falter all they want, but that church is heading in the wrong direction, and I'm sure God has a great plan for it in the right direction, and his name is Vigano. All right. Story number 5. When I was watching Trump with the Canadian Prime Minister, because it was going to be high comedy, and the first time we actually see a president stand up for America and speak the truth to these goofballs. Anyway, before he even started, he said, we just got fantastic news that the Houthis contacted Washington and said, okay, we're done. We're not going to do any more of this because since mid-March, Pete Hegseth and his strategists have been punishing the Houthis. They had a great idea, which was to send 2 jets out on what looked like reconnaissance. And what they were doing was baiting the Houthi missile folks to fire missiles at them. And then they do all kinds of countermeasures and drop flares and chaff and everything. And when the missiles miss them the first time, then they have to be recalibrated by all the other missile sites to come up with a new trajectory to get the jets. So all of that is being tracked by AWACS planes above, and then they sight in on all those other missile banks. And the 2 jets leave the area, And then what comes is an unbelievable overwatch of devastating power, missiles, and a dozen jets, and they just decimate all of these missile batteries. And that's what's been going on. So it made perfect sense that they would call and say, we're done. And I wrote up this whole thing about peace through strength and how all the other countries in the Middle East are seeing that there's a new sheriff in town. And then last night, the stupid Houthis, they fired missiles on the aircraft carrier Truman. So we're back in it. Trump is going to be ripped because he, announced, and he was pretty proud about it, that the technique was working and that we're setting a new example in the Middle East. And then those stupid fools go and do this. I shudder to think what is going to rain down on them now. But you know what? Everybody learns in different ways. So now, story number 6. We're going to finish up. This is going to be pain for some people, but I think it's funny. As somebody who paid off my student loan, this is another Biden cleanup on aisle 3 that has to be done, because he told all of these people for 4 years who have student loans that he was going to waive their payments, right, to try to get reelected. And then he couldn't do that. Only a few of them got it. I know some people that got it. But starting in June, with a 30-day notice, payments are due, and they're aggressively due. They're doing something called involuntary collections. What's that mean? That means if you haven't been paying on your student loan, I paid mine off, I don't want to pay yours off. Involuntary collection means they'll grab your tax refund check. It means they'll grab your Social Security check if you're that old and still haven't paid them off. Any kind of government benefit that you're due can be applied to these student loans. So the 30-day notice goes out today, and we're talking about 5 million Americans who borrowed all this money to get a college degree, and now they don't want to pay it back. In fact, it's worse than that. They want us to pay it back. And guess how much those 5 million owe? $250 billion. Don't you want to pay their debt off for them? Personally, I would rather go to the MET Gala. Well, that's it today. Please like and share, and please have a great day at work, and God bless you.
If you want the truth, don't close your eyes.